The morning sun was just beginning to warm up the parking lot when David pulled his 10-year-old Honda into a spot near the entrance of Riverside Auto Sales. He turned off the engine and sat there for a moment, looking at the building through his windshield. The dealership looked decent enough from the outside with its large glass windows and rows of shiny cars on display. But David knew better than to judge a business by its exterior. He was dressed casually that day, wearing his favorite pair of jeans and a simple blue polo shirt. Nothing fancy. He'd left his expensive watch at home and driven his old reliable car instead of the luxury sedan sitting in his garage. There was a reason for all of this. David wanted to see what this place was really like when nobody knew who he was. At 42 years old, David had spent more than half his life in the car business. He'd started at the very bottom, washing cars in the summer heat when he was just a teenager trying to save money for college. Over the years, he'd worked every job you could think of at a dealership. He knew what made a good one and what made a bad one. And 3 weeks ago, he'd bought this particular dealership because he thought it had potential. But he hadn't told anyone here who he was yet. He wanted to walk in like any regular customer would and see how things really worked. David grabbed his phone, locked his car, and walked toward the entrance. The automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh and he stepped inside. The air conditioning hit him immediately, a welcome relief from the heat outside. The showroom was big and open, with about a dozen cars positioned carefully under bright lights. Everything looked clean enough at first glance. But as David stood there taking it all in, he noticed things that bothered him. Over by the far wall, 3 salespeople were huddled around a desk, laughing at something on a phone screen. None of them even looked up when he walked in. Near the customer waiting area, he could see coffee stains on one of the tables that nobody had bothered to wipe up. The trash can was overflowing with old coffee cups and fast food wrappers. This wasn't what a professional dealership should look like. David walked further into the showroom, his footsteps echoing slightly on the polished floor. He ran his hand along the hood of a silver SUV, checking for dust. There was quite a bit of it. These cars weren't being properly maintained. Finally, one of the salespeople noticed him. The man was probably in his late 40s, wearing a polo shirt with the dealership's logo on it. But instead of coming over to help, the salesman just glanced at David, then went back to his conversation with his coworkers. David could see them looking his way and talking quietly among themselves. He knew what they were thinking. They saw his old car in the parking lot. They saw his casual clothes. And they decided he wasn't worth their time. David had experienced this before, more times than he cared to remember. It never stopped bothering him, but he'd learned to expect it. People made assumptions. They looked at the surface and thought they knew everything. He continued walking around the showroom, examining the vehicles, reading the window stickers, checking the prices. He was actually impressed with some of the inventory. With the right management and better customer service, this place could really succeed. That's when he heard footsteps approaching quickly from behind. David turned to see a tall man in his early 50s striding toward him, with the expression that was anything but welcoming. The man's dress shirt was wrinkled and his tie was loosened like he'd been having a stressful day. David recognized him from the employee photos he'd reviewed. This was Robert Hayes, the general manager who'd been running the dealership for the past 5 years. Robert stopped a few feet away from David and crossed his arms. His body language was clear. He wasn't here to help. He was here to judge. "Can I help you with something?" Robert asked. His tone made it obvious he hoped the answer was no. David smiled politely. "Yes, actually. I'm here to look around and..." "Look around?" Robert interrupted, not even trying to hide his irritation. "Our inventory is all online. You can browse from home if you're just looking." David felt his jaw tighten slightly, but he kept his voice calm and friendly. "I prefer to see cars in person before I make any decisions." "I'm sure you understand." Robert let out a short laugh that held no humor. "Decisions? Listen, friend, I've been doing this job for 15 years. I can tell within 30 seconds whether someone's a serious buyer or just killing time. These vehicles here?" He gestured around the showroom. "They're not exactly in everyone's budget." The disrespect in his voice was unmistakable. David could feel the eyes of other employees on them now. The salespeople who'd been ignoring him were now watching with interest. A young woman sitting at one of the desks looked uncomfortable, like she wanted to say something but didn't dare. David took a deep breath. He'd come here hoping his first impression was wrong, hoping that maybe the problems he'd seen in the paperwork were just temporary issues. But this was worse than he'd imagined. This wasn't just poor management. This was a complete failure of basic customer service and human decency. "Mr. Hayes," David said calmly, using the manager's name deliberately, "I think there's been a misunderstanding." Robert's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "How do you know my name? Who are you?" Before David could answer, Robert took a step closer, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Are you one of those mystery shoppers? Corporate send you here to spy on us?" "No, I'm not a mystery shopper," David replied, keeping his tone even despite his growing frustration. "If you just give me a minute to explain." "I don't think so," Robert cut him off again. His face was turning red now and his voice was getting louder. "I'm tired of people coming in here wasting my time. I've got real customers to deal with, real sales to make. Whatever you're doing here, you need to leave. Now." The showroom had gone completely quiet. Everyone was staring now. David stood his ground, even though every person in the showroom was now watching them. He could feel his heart beating faster, not from fear, but from the frustration of being treated this way. He'd dealt with difficult people throughout his career, but it never got easier, especially when that person was supposed to be leading a team and serving customers. "Mr. Hayes, I really think we should talk about this in private," David said, trying one more time to handle this situation with dignity. "There are things you need to know." But Robert wasn't interested in listening. His face had gone from red to almost purple, and his voice grew even louder. "Private? Oh, now you want privacy? Let me tell you something, buddy. I've seen your type before. You come in here with your old car and your casual clothes thinking you can waste my time, distract my staff, and walk around like you own the place." The words hit David harder than Robert probably intended. "Like you own the place. If only he knew." "I'm not trying to waste anyone's time," David replied, his voice still calm but with an edge to it now. "I have legitimate business here, and I'm asking you respectfully to hear me out." "Legitimate business?" Robert scoffed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "What business could you possibly have here? You looking to apply for a job in our service department? Because that's the only way I can see you affording anything on this lot." A few of the salespeople shifted uncomfortably. The young woman at the desk looked down at her paperwork, her face flushed with embarrassment. An older gentleman wearing a security uniform had appeared near the entrance, clearly called by someone on staff. He looked confused about what was happening. David felt his patience running thin. He'd given this man multiple chances to stop, to listen, to show even a basic level of professionalism. But Robert was too caught up in his own assumptions and anger to see what was right in front of him. "You're making a serious mistake right now," David said quietly, but with a firmness that made a few people lean in to hear better. "I strongly suggest you take a step back and reconsider how you're handling the situation." Robert let out a harsh laugh. "Is that a threat?" "Are you threatening me?" "That's it, George." He called out to the security guard. "I need you to escort this man off the property. He's trespassing and he's being aggressive." The security guard, George, walked over slowly. He was probably in his late 60s with gray hair and kind eyes that looked troubled by what he was being asked to do. He glanced between Robert and David, clearly uncomfortable with the whole situation. "Sir," George said to David, his voice apologetic, "I'm going to have to ask you to leave. I don't want any trouble here." "There won't be any trouble, George," David said, looking directly at the older man. "But I'm not leaving. Not yet." Robert moved closer, invading David's personal space in a way that was clearly meant to intimidate. "Oh, you're not leaving? You think you can just refuse? This is private property and I'm the general manager. What I say goes. You either walk out of here right now or I'm calling the police." Several customers who'd been looking at cars had stopped what they were doing. A couple of them had their phones out, recording the confrontation. David noticed but didn't care. If anything, he was glad there would be evidence of how Robert Hayes treated people. "Call whoever you need to call," David said, pulling out his own phone. "But I'm making a call too. There's someone who can clear this up in a few minutes."
"Oh, calling for backup?"
Robert mocked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "What, you got a lawyer on speed dial? Going to sue me for hurting your feelings?" David ignored the jab and dialed a number. The phone rang twice before a professional voice answered. "David, is everything all right?" "Helen, I'm at the dealership," David said calmly. "We have a situation here. Can you bring the ownership documents?" "I'm in the main showroom." There was a brief pause on the other end, Oh no, what happened? Just bring the papers, please. You're only 5 minutes away, right? I'm walking out the door right now, Helen replied. I'll be there in 3 minutes. David ended the call and slipped his phone back into his pocket. He looked at Robert, whose expression had shifted from anger to something else. Uncertainty, maybe, or the first hint of fear. Who was that? Robert demanded, but his voice had lost some of its edge. What documents? You'll see soon enough, David replied. The showroom felt like it was holding its breath. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The young woman at the desk was biting her lip, looking like she might cry. One of the older salesmen who'd been ignoring David earlier now had a worried expression on his face, like he was starting to piece something together. George, the security guard, stepped back a little. He'd worked in security long enough to read people, and something about David's confidence was making him reconsider the situation. Mr. Hayes, maybe we should wait and see what's going on here before we do anything hasty. Hasty? Robert snapped at him. I'm handling this situation the way it needs to be handled. This man is disrupting our business and I want him removed. That's your job, George. So do it. George looked at David again. Really looked at him this time. There was something in David's eyes, a quiet certainty that didn't match someone who was in the wrong. Sir, I think maybe. I don't pay you to think. Robert shouted, losing control now. I pay you to follow orders. Either you escort him out or I'll find someone who will. The automatic doors at the entrance slid open and everyone turned to look. A woman in her late 30s walked in, wearing a sharp business suit and carrying a leather briefcase. She had the confident walk of someone who knew exactly where she was going and why. Helen Brooks, attorney at law, had arrived right on time. She walked straight past Robert without even glancing at him, her heels clicking on the showroom floor. When she reached David, she gave him a slight nod. I brought everything you asked for. Robert stared at the briefcase like it was a bomb about to go off. His face had gone pale. Who are you? Helen turned to look at him for the first time and her expression was ice cold. I'm Helen Brooks, attorney for Thompson Automotive Group. And you must be Robert Hayes. The color drained completely from Robert's face. The name hung in the air like thunder before a storm. Thompson Automotive Group. Robert's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. His hand started to tremble slightly and he grabbed onto the edge of a nearby desk to steady himself. That's impossible, Robert finally managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. The new owner is some investment company. I've never met them. They never came here. Helen opened her briefcase with practiced efficiency, pulling out a thick folder of documents. Thompson Automotive Group is the investment company, and this is David Thompson, the owner and CEO. He purchased this dealership 3 weeks ago. Perhaps you should have read your emails more carefully. David watched as Robert's face went through several different shades of white. The man looked like he might be sick. All around them, the staff stood frozen, barely breathing. The young woman at the desk had her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. The salespeople who'd been laughing earlier now looked terrified. I don't believe this, Robert said, but his voice cracked. This is some kind of scam. You're trying to trick me. A scam? Helen's voice was sharp as a knife. Mr. Hayes, I've been working on this acquisition for 2 months. Every document has been filed. Every signature verified. Every dollar transferred. This dealership changed ownership 21 days ago, and you've been sent multiple emails about it. She pulled out several papers and held them up. These are the purchase agreements. These are the transfer documents. This is the official notification that was sent to you and every other employee here. Would you like to see the bank statements showing the wire transfer? Robert reached for the papers with shaking hands. His eyes scanned the documents, and with each page he read, he seemed to shrink a little more. The confident, aggressive manager who'd been shouting just minutes ago now looked like a man watching his entire world collapse. David could almost feel sorry for him. Almost, but then he remembered the contempt in Robert's voice, the way he'd treated him like he was nothing, like he didn't deserve basic respect. This wasn't just about today. David had been reading through complaint records for weeks. Customer after customer had reported feeling dismissed, disrespected, or ignored by the management here. This was a pattern, not a mistake. This can't be happening, Robert muttered, still staring at the papers. I've been running this place for 5 years. 5 years of hard work. I built this team. I made this dealership what it is. What it is, David said quietly, is struggling. Sales are down 30% from 2 years ago. Customer satisfaction scores are some of the lowest I've ever seen. Employee turnover is through the roof. People quit faster than you can hire them. And now I understand why. George, the security guard, took another step back, giving David plenty of space. The old man's face showed a mix of emotions, relief, and vindication among them. David made a mental note to talk to him later. George had tried to de-escalate the situation when Robert was out of control. That showed good judgment. One of the younger salespeople, a guy who looked barely old enough to be out of college, raised his hand slightly like he was in a classroom. "Excuse me, Mr. Thompson? I just want to say that not all of us agree with how things have been run here. Some of us have been trying to do right by the customers." Robert spun around, his face flushing red again. "Shut your mouth, Kevin. This doesn't concern you." "Actually, it concerns everyone here," David said firmly. "And Kevin, thank you for speaking up. That takes courage." The young woman at the desk finally found her voice. "Mr. Thompson, I'm Lisa. I've been working here for 8 months, and I've seen things that bothered me. I wanted to say something so many times, but I was afraid I'd lose my job." "You were afraid of retaliation?" David asked, though he already knew the answer. Lisa nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "I saw Mr. Hayes turn away customers before. People who looked different or dressed casually or drove older cars. He called them tire kickers, said they were wasting our time. But they were people who wanted to buy cars. They had money. They just didn't look the way he thought they should look." "That's a lie," Robert shouted, but his voice was desperate now, not angry. "She's making that up. She's trying to make me look bad." "I'm not lying," Lisa said, her voice stronger now. "I have emails. I have notes. I documented everything because I knew it was wrong." Another salesperson spoke up, an older man with gray at his temples. "I can back that up. I've been in this business for 20 years, worked at 6 different dealerships. This is the worst I've ever seen. I was actually planning to quit next month." David looked around the showroom at the faces staring back at him. Some looked hopeful. Some looked scared. Some looked angry. But they were all paying attention now, really paying attention in a way they probably hadn't in years. Robert made one last, desperate attempt. "Mr. Thompson, please. Let me explain. You don't understand the pressure I've been under. The corporate targets, the monthly quotas, the competition. I was just trying to focus on serious buyers, the ones who would actually close deals. By judging them based on how they looked?" David asked. "By treating them with disrespect? By creating a culture where your own employees were afraid to speak up? I made mistakes, okay?" Robert's voice was pleading now. "But everyone makes mistakes. You can't fire me for one bad day. I have a family. I have bills. I've given 15 years of my life to this industry." David took a deep breath. This was the moment he'd been dreading, but it had to be done. "Mr. Hayes, this isn't about one bad day. This is about a pattern of behavior that's been destroying this business from the inside out. This is about values that don't align with how I run my companies. This is about the way you treat people when you think nobody's watching." He paused, looking Robert directly in the eyes. "You're fired, effective immediately. Helen will arrange your severance package. You'll get 2 weeks' pay, and your benefits will continue for 30 days while you look for other employment. George will escort you to your office so you can collect your personal belongings." Robert's face crumbled. For a moment, David thought the man might actually break down crying. But instead, Robert just nodded slowly, all the fight gone out of him. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning. "George," David said gently to the security guard, "can you help Mr. Hayes gather his things? Make sure he's treated with dignity." George nodded. "Yes, sir." "Come on, Robert. Let's get your stuff." As they walked away, the showroom remained silent. Everyone was processing what had just happened. Their general manager of 5 years was gone, fired on the spot. And the new owner was standing right there in front of them, wearing jeans and a polo shirt, having just witnessed everything. The showroom remained eerily quiet after Robert and George disappeared down the hallway toward the offices. David could feel every pair of eyes on him, waiting to see what would happen next. Some of the employees looked nervous, probably wondering if they were about to lose their jobs too. Others looked curious, maybe even hopeful. Helen closed her briefcase and turned to David. "I'll handle the paperwork for Mr. Hayes and make sure everything is done properly. Do you need me to stay?" "No, I've got it from here," David replied. "Thank you for coming so quickly." "Any time," Helen said with a slight smile. "Good luck with all of this." She nodded politely to the gathered staff and walked back out through the automatic doors. David turned to face the employees fully. There were about 15 people scattered around the showroom now, including the salespeople, a couple of finance managers, and someone from the service department who'd wandered in to see what all the commotion was about. "I know this has been uncomfortable for everyone," David began, keeping his voice calm and steady. "And I know you probably have a lot of questions about what happens next." Lisa, the young woman who'd spoken up earlier, raised her hand again. "Are you going to fire all of us?" Several people held their breath, waiting for the answer. "No," David said firmly. "I'm not here to clean house. I'm here to build something better. But I need to be honest with you. This dealership has serious problems. The numbers don't lie. We're losing customers, losing money, and losing good employees. That has to change." Kevin, the young salesman, spoke up. "What kind of changes are you talking about?" "Big ones," David admitted. "Starting with how we treat people. Every single person who walks through that door deserves respect, whether they're buying a $50,000 truck or just looking at their options. I don't care what car they drove here in. I don't care what they're wearing. They're a human being first and a potential customer second." One of the older salesmen, the one who'd said he was planning to quit, nodded approvingly. "That's how it should be. That's how I was taught when I started in this business." "What's your name?" David asked him. "Vincent. Been selling cars for 22 years now." "Vincent, I'd like to talk with you later about your experience here and what you think needs to change. People with your kind of background are valuable. You've seen what works and what doesn't." Vincent looked surprised but pleased. "I'd be happy to talk with you, sir." David walked over to one of the leather couches in the customer waiting area and sat down, gesturing for the others to gather around. It was a deliberate choice. He didn't want to stand over them like some authority figure giving orders. He wanted this to feel like a conversation. "Here's the truth," David said once everyone had moved closer. "I started in this business when I was 16 years old. My first job was washing cars in the summer heat for minimum wage. I was so excited just to be working around cars that I didn't care. I worked my way up slowly. Lot attendant, then service advisor, then sales, then finance manager. I learned every single job in a dealership by doing it." Lisa sat down on the opposite couch, listening intently. "How did you end up owning dealerships?" "Hard work and a lot of luck," David said honestly. "I saved every penny I could. I went to night school and got my business degree. When I was 30, I became a general manager at a struggling dealership in Texas. We turned it around in 2 years. After that, I managed to buy a small used car lot. Then another. Then a franchise dealership. I built my company one step at a time." "Why did you buy this place?" Vincent asked. "It's pretty clear we're not doing well." "Because I saw potential," David replied. "This location is great. The inventory is actually pretty good. And from what I can see right now, there are people here who care about doing the right thing. That's what matters most." A woman David hadn't noticed before stepped forward. She was probably in her 40s, dressed professionally, and had the confident bearing of someone who knew her job well. "Mr. Thompson, I'm Patricia from the finance department. I've been here for 3 years and I have to say it's been frustrating. We've tried to implement better customer service practices, but Mr. Hayes always shut us down. He said his way was the only way that worked." "That's going to change," David assured her. "In fact, I want to hear everyone's ideas. You're the ones on the floor every day. You know what customers are asking for. You know what's working and what isn't. Your input matters." Kevin leaned forward, his eyes bright with interest. "So we can actually suggest things? Like real changes?" "Not only can you suggest them," David said, "I'm counting on it. Tomorrow morning we're having an all-staff meeting at 8 o'clock. I want everyone here, including service department, parts, everyone. We're going to talk about where we're going and how we're going to get there." "What about today?" Lisa asked. "What should we do for the rest of the day?" David stood up and looked around the showroom. "Today we get back to work. There are customers out there who need cars. There are people in the service department waiting for their vehicles. We do our jobs, but we do them the right way. Every customer gets treated with respect. Every question gets answered honestly. Every person who comes through that door matters." Vincent stood up too, straightening his tie. "I think I can get behind that kind of leadership." "Good," David said with a genuine smile. "Because I'm going to need people like you to help build this culture. It won't happen overnight. Change is hard. But it's necessary." Patricia crossed her arms, but she was smiling. I almost quit last month. I had another job offer, but I think I'll stick around and see what happens here. I'm glad to hear that, David said. We need experienced people who know what they're doing. The tension in the room had shifted. It wasn't completely gone. There was still uncertainty about the future, but it felt different now. People were standing a little straighter. There was energy in the air that hadn't been there before. George returned from escorting Robert out, looking relieved that the difficult task was over. He approached David cautiously. Mr. Thompson, I just want to apologize again for earlier. I should have questioned what was happening instead of just following orders. George, you did question it, David reminded him. I heard you try to get Robert to reconsider. You did what you could in a difficult situation. That shows me you have good judgment. The older man's face lit up with relief. Thank you, sir. I've been doing security work for 30 years, and I've never felt right about how some things were handled here. Then help me change it, David said. I'd like you to be part of training our team on creating a welcoming environment. Security isn't just about protection. It's about making people feel safe and welcome. George stood a little taller. I'd be honored to do that. David looked at his watch. It was almost noon. All right, everyone. Let's get back to it. We've got an afternoon of sales to make and customers to serve. Remember, fresh start. New approach. Treat people right. As the staff dispersed back to their stations, David noticed that several of them were talking excitedly among themselves. Lisa was smiling for the first time since he'd arrived. Kevin was already on the phone with what sounded like a customer, his voice professional and enthusiastic. Vincent approached David one more time before heading back to the sales floor. You know, Mr. Thompson, I haven't felt this good about coming to work in over a year. Thank you for that. David shook his hand firmly. Thank you for sticking it out. Experience like yours is invaluable. As Vincent walked away, David allowed himself a moment to take it all in. The confrontation with Robert had been unpleasant, but necessary. Now came the real work. David spent the rest of the afternoon walking around the dealership, introducing himself to people he hadn't met yet. He talked to the mechanics in the service bay, the parts department staff, and even the young guy who handled the car wash. Everyone had the same reaction at first, surprised that the owner was taking time to actually speak with them. But after a few minutes of conversation, they relaxed and started opening up about their experiences. By 5 o'clock, David had filled 3 pages in his notebook with observations and ideas. The problems ran deeper than he'd thought, but so did the potential. There were good people here who genuinely cared about their work. They'd just been working under leadership that didn't value them. As the workday wound down, Lisa approached him hesitantly. Mr. Thompson, can I talk to you for a minute? Of course, David said, putting down his notebook. What's on your mind? She glanced around to make sure no one else was listening. I just wanted to say thank you for what you did today. I know it wasn't easy, firing Mr. Hayes in front of everyone like that. But honestly, it needed to happen. He made this place miserable for a lot of us. How long has it been that bad? David asked. Lisa thought about it. It got really bad about 2 years ago. Before that, he was tough but fair. Then something changed. He became obsessed with numbers, with hitting targets no matter what. He started cutting corners, pressuring us to push extended warranties that customers didn't need, telling us to ignore anyone who didn't look like a serious buyer. Some of us complained to corporate, but nothing ever happened. Corporate wasn't listening, David said, understanding now why the previous owners had been willing to sell at the price they did. That's going to change. I want you to know that if you or anyone else sees something wrong, you can come directly to me. My door is always open. Even after you're not here every day? Lisa asked. Even then, David assured her. I'll be here frequently, especially over the next few months. But when I'm not, I'll make sure you have ways to reach me. Email, phone, whatever works. Lisa smiled and David could see the relief in her eyes. That means a lot. I really love working with cars and helping people find the right vehicle for their family. I just couldn't stand the way we were treating them. Then help me change it, David said. I'm going to need people who understand what good customer service really means. People who care about doing things right. After Lisa left, David walked out to the parking lot. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. He leaned against his old Honda and pulled out his phone. His wife answered on the second ring. Hey honey, how did it go? Rachel asked. David let out a long breath. It was intense. I had to fire the general manager. Oh no, what happened? He told her the whole story, from the moment he walked into the confrontation with Robert to the conversations he'd had with the staff afterward. Rachel listened quietly, only interrupting once to gasp when he described how Robert had treated him. I can't believe he said those things to you, she said when he finished. Are you okay? I'm fine, David replied. Honestly, I'm more concerned about the dealership. There's a lot of work to do here, Rachel, more than I realized. But you can do it, she said with the confidence she always had in him. You've turned around struggling businesses before. This is what you're good at. I know, but this one feels different. Maybe because of how it started. Maybe because I saw firsthand how bad the culture had gotten. That's exactly why you're the right person to fix it, Rachel said. You understand what it's like to be treated poorly, to be judged unfairly. You won't forget that when you're making decisions? David smiled. After 20 years of marriage, Rachel still knew exactly what to say. You're right. I'll be home in about an hour. Traffic shouldn't be too bad. Drive safe. I love you. Love you too. As David ended the call, he noticed Vincent walking out to the parking lot. The older salesman waved and headed over. Heading home? Vincent asked. Yeah, long day, David replied. Vincent nodded, then seemed to be working up the courage to say something. Mr. Thompson, I just wanted you to know that what you did today, it gave a lot of us hope. I've been in this business long enough to see plenty of owners who just care about the bottom line. You seem different. I care about the bottom line too, David admitted. I have to, or we won't stay in business. But I also believe that if you take care of your people and your customers, the numbers will follow. Maybe not immediately, but eventually. That's the way it used to be, Vincent said, a hint of nostalgia in his voice. When I first started selling cars, my manager told me that every customer is somebody's mom, somebody's dad, somebody's kid. Treat them the way you'd want your own family treated. That stuck with me. That's good advice, David said. Mind if I share that at the meeting tomorrow? Be my guest, Vincent said with a grin. See you in the morning, boss. David watched as Vincent drove away, then climbed into his own car. As he started the engine, he looked back at the dealership through his rearview mirror. The lights were still on inside, and he could see George doing his final security rounds before locking up for the night. Tomorrow would be a new beginning. The staff meeting would set the tone for everything that came after. David had already planned what he wanted to say, the values he wanted to establish, the vision he had for turning this place around. But tonight, driving home through the evening traffic, he allowed himself to feel something he hadn't expected. Pride. Not in firing Robert, that had been necessary but not pleasant. He felt proud of the employees who'd spoken up, who'd shown courage in a difficult situation. Proud of Lisa for documenting the problems even when she was scared. Proud of Vincent for sticking with his principles even in a toxic environment. Proud of George for questioning orders that didn't feel right. These were good people. They deserved a workplace that valued them, that respected them, that gave them a chance to do their best work. And David was going to make sure they got it. His phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Helen, his attorney. The message was brief. Robert's paperwork is all handled. He left without incident. New chapter starts tomorrow. You've got this. David smiled and typed back a quick thank you. Then he put his phone away and focused on the road ahead. The next few months would be challenging. There would be resistance to change, inevitable mistakes, and problems he hadn't even discovered yet. But David had been through this before. He knew what it took to rebuild a struggling business from the ground up. More importantly, he knew why it mattered. Because somewhere out there was a person who would walk into Riverside Auto Sales looking for a car. Maybe they'd be dressed casually. Maybe they'd drive an old vehicle. Maybe they wouldn't look like what someone expected a serious buyer to look like. And when that person walked through the doors, they would be treated with dignity and respect, not because of how much money they might spend, but because they were a human being who deserved it. That's what David had been fighting for his entire career. And that's what he would build here, one day at a time, one customer at a time, one employee at a time. As David pulled into his driveway and saw Rachel waiting for him on the front porch, he felt ready for whatever came next. Tomorrow the real work would begin, but tonight he was just glad to be home.